In northern Tennessee, nestled along the Red River, there's a stretch of land that looks like any other and holds a cave that most locals won't go near. It's peaceful now, but that peace has a history, and it came at a price. This is the story of America's most terrifying haunting, not just whispers in the dark or doors slamming shut. This haunting has a name, a voice, and a body count. This is the story of the Bell Witch. Welcome back to Legends May Live, where we explore the strange, the mysterious, and the downright eerie. A quick note before we start. All of our stories are reportedly true, but keep in mind that this is a podcast and not a documentary. We may not get every detail right. And this story in particular is likely filled with folklore intermingled in the truth. In 1817, Adams, Tennessee was, for the most part, just a bunch of farmland, forests and dirt roads, winding past churches and creeks. Families lived close to the land and closer to their faith. Among them was the Bell family. John Bell, a proud farmer, had moved his wife Lucy and their children from North Carolina a few years earlier. He bought a little over 300 acres and built life there from the ground up. He raised crops, traded in town, and he earned a reputation as an honest and upright man. The Bells were well-liked and a respected family. But the Bell property, as it turns out, seemed to hold on to something or someone sinister that was about to wake up. The Bell children roamed the property without fear. They played by the river, helped with the farm chores, and just ran freely through the woods. Among them was a bright and cheerful girl named Betsy Bell. She was growing into her teenage years, and like most girls her age, she had dreams of her future. She looked forward to one day getting married and having a family of her own. But before long, Betsy would become the central focus of something that defied explanation, something that no one could protect her from. Over the course of a few weeks, Betsy started to hear what she thought were fairly explainable noises. At first, it was just a soft knock against the wall at night, then scratching. It was kind of faint, like mice behind the plaster, just nothing really to worry about. But soon it escalated. They could hear slow, deliberate footsteps pacing the hallway when everyone was in bed. Though he didn't hear it himself, John Bell believed Betsy, and he thought it was likely animals, possibly a raccoon on the roof, and the sound just made it seem like it was coming from inside, or maybe even something under the floor just bumping up. So he laid traps and nailed down those loose boards, but that didn't stop the noises. In fact, it just kept getting worse. The knocking grew louder. The footsteps sounded closer, until one night the sound was coming from inside the bedroom walls. One night, Betsy was startled awake. Her blankets were halfway across the room, and she was cold and confused. She tried to call out, but no sound came. She was terrified already, but to make things worse, from the quiet dark of her room, there was a whisper. Betsy. She sat straight up, looking around. The room was empty, but the hair on her arms were standing on end, and her heart was beating heavily. After a few minutes, though, she was able to convince herself that, okay, that was crazy, but that was just a dream. It's fine. And she lay back down to go to sleep. But over the next few days, the entire Bell family began to hear it. The scratching turned into gnawing, the knocking into slamming, and the voice came back, clearer, sharper, and louder. It would say John, Lucy, Betsy. Lucy Bell began waking up tired, her dreams clouded by sounds she couldn't quite remember. And Betsy cried at night, saying that something was pulling her hair. And at first, John tried to hide it from the neighbors. He told the children, don't talk about it, don't talk about the noises. He was afraid that if anyone heard, that they would just be ridiculed. But soon, he wouldn't have a choice. Because whatever was in their home wanted an audience. By the fall of 1817, the Bell household was no longer just afraid. They were under siege. The sounds gone from whispering to speaking a name to full sentences. And they were sarcastic and mocking. One moment quoting scripture, the next cursing. That voice, wherever it was coming from, had a personality. And it wasn't just the family who heard it. Friends came to pray. Preachers came to investigate. Neighbors came just to see if the rumors were true. And one by one, they left pale and shaken, some in tears. The spirit would often recite entire sermons word for word, sermons being delivered that very night, miles away at churches across the region. People said it knew things that it had no business knowing. Secret affairs, private conversations. It would call them out by name, in a voice no one recognized. And then there were the voices it mimicked. One day, Lucy Bell was cooking in the kitchen when she heard her youngest son call to her from behind. But when she turned around, the boy wasn't there. He was still outside in the yard. And that night, she heard John call out from the porch, except John was asleep in his chair. And then the voice started laughing. One witness, William Porter, was staying the night with the Bells to investigate. He claimed that the spirit tried to pull him out of bed by the ankles, and it set the covers on fire. He said he managed to wrestle free and escape, but he never returned to the Bell home again. The Bell family was known for this across the country, and people came from all over just to hear the thing speak. It loved attention. It would answer questions, debate scripture, sing hymns, and insult guests in a perfect Southern cadence. One evening, a man named James Johnson, he was a local skeptic, stayed the night to disprove the legend. But he left before sunrise, and his only words were, something was there, and it wasn't human. The Bell family's once peaceful farm had become a stage, and the voice, whatever it was, had claimed the lead role. At first, the voice mostly just talked. It taunted, it mimicked, it sang and sermonized, but then it began to act out more and more. Betsy Bell was its favorite target. The invisible hands that once tugged her hair now slapped her full across the face, hard enough to leave welts, hard enough that everyone could hear it, the sound of it. One night she woke up screaming. Her pillow was on the floor, her body was twisted in bed, and she had a red handprint around her neck. Something had tried to choke her in her sleep. And to this, John Bell was furious. He cursed the entity and demanded it leave his daughter alone. But that night, he was thrown from his chair across the room. And from there, the family began to sleep in shifts. They prayed, they begged, and they read scripture until dawn, but it didn't stop. Several family friends, including the Johnstons, Bennetts, and Guns, later testified to the experience of physical attacks, being slapped, scratched, or shoved, even when standing in groups. The witch didn't seem bound by logic, or physics for that matter. And as things went on, word of the Bell Witch spread far beyond Adams, Tennessee. In fact, one day, a high-ranking visitor arrived, General Andrew Jackson, hero of the War of 1812 and the future President of the United States. He had heard stories of a talking ghost and a girl being beaten by something unseen. He was skeptical, yet curious. He came with horses, wagons, men, all armed and ready to just debunk the whole affair. But he never made it to the house. As his caravan approached, the wagon suddenly froze. The horses reared and refused to move. The wheels locked and nothing was blocking them. The men pushed, cursed, inspected every axle. Nothing worked. And then a voice, a woman's voice, clear as day, spoke from nowhere. "You may go no further, General Jackson, until I am ready." The wagon lurched forward, suddenly free, and Jackson, white-knuckled and shaken, reportedly said, "By the Eternal, I would rather fight the entire British army than face the Bell Witch again." He didn't stay the night as he had planned, and neither did his men. The Bell Witch wasn't just a nuisance. She was an intelligent, malicious presence that seemed to grow stronger with every scream, every witness, every soul that feared her. And her obsession, her true target, was just beginning to feel the full weight of her wrath. By now, the Bell family felt the weight of the creeping, helpless realization that they were not alone in their own home, and they hadn't been for some time. The entity, once a voice in the shadows, now had something closer to an identity. One, right after a string of torment, John Bell demanded it speak plainly. "Who are you, and what do you want from us?" And the answer came immediately. I am Kate. It was the first time the voice offered a name. Kate. Some believe this was a direct reference to Kate Batts, a neighbor who, often described as eccentric or even unwell. She and John had a long-standing dispute over a land deal, and some said she had been cheated, while others said she was just bitter. Locals had whispered that she dabbled in the occult, that she cursed people under her breath, and now, even years after her supposed death, her name had returned. But not everyone was convinced, because Kate wasn't the only name the spirit used. At times it claimed to be a ghost. Other times it said it was the ghost of a Native American child buried beneath the Bell's land without a proper ceremony. Then it said it was many spirits working as one. When asked why it targeted the Bells, it laughed and said, "Old Jack knows what he did." No one could explain it, but what they did know was that Kate seemed to have one mission: to destroy John Bell. The spirit occasionally changed personalities mid-sentence, going from sweet and soothing to vicious and mocking. Some claimed it could speak in multiple voices at once, including languages that no one in the house had ever learned. And then there was Betsy, sweet, tormented Betsy, now nearly a woman and engaged to be married to a young man named Joshua Gardner. He was a kind soul who respected and cared deeply for Betsy. He tried to shield her from the haunting, but the Bell Witch would not have it. Every time Joshua visited, the air in the house turned heavy and candles flickered out, knocks pounded on the walls. Betsy would seize and scream and then collapse. "He is not for you," the spirit would say. "He must leave, or I will make him leave." Betsy clung to Joshua. He was her hope. But with every passing day, the pressure just grew, and the entity, it was only just the beginning. Soon John Bell's health began to decline. It started with small things, just tremors in his hands, stiffness in his jaw, headaches that wouldn't go away. And then he became forgetful and grew weak and just unsteady on his feet. The doctor suspected a neurological problem, but nothing really explained the speed of the deterioration or the timing. Because every time John collapsed, every time he faltered, the voice would appear and say, "Old Jack's time is near. He will not see another Christmas." But for whatever reason, it always called him Old Jack or Old Jack Bell. John tried to ignore it, her warnings, but he kept working and just kept praying, but the spirit never let up. It would call him out by name, mock him, berate him, threaten him in front of his kids. And when he tried to read from the Bible, the pages would just blow about. When he tried to speak, he bit his own tongue like something was just slamming his jaw shut. And then finally, one morning in the late 1820s, John just didn't wake up. He was found in bed, still breathing, but barely. Betsy ran to the medicine cabinet to retrieve his medicine, but the bottle was missing. In its place was a small vial of this black liquid. And then the voice appeared again and said loud and just giddy, "I gave him a big dose last night. He'll never wake up again." And panicked, the family forced a drop of the liquid down the throat of their cat to test it, and the cat convulsed and died within seconds. This was documented by multiple sources, including Dr. Charles Bailey Bell, a direct descendant. And the story of the poisoned vial was passed down through generations and included in official Bell family records. John Bell slipped into unconsciousness and died the next day, on December 20th, 1820, the first and possibly, or probably, the only known case of a haunting that openly confessed to murder. At his funeral, as the family wept, the neighbors gathered in stunned silence, and then the voice returned, not weeping or remorseful, but singing. It was singing, "Old Jack is dead, good day to all." Even in death, the Bell Witch found a way to desecrate the moment, to make sure her victory was never forgotten. And yet, she still wasn't finished. There was one more life she wanted to destroy: Betsy Bell. After her father's death, Betsy Bell tried to move forward. She leaned on her mother, on her siblings, and most of all, she leaned on Joshua Gardner, her fiancé. He was kind and protective, a familiar face in a world that had become unrecognizable. Their engagement had been arranged before the haunting began, but now it felt like their last chance at anything normal. And they talked about leaving Adams, starting fresh and just putting the nightmare behind them. But the witch wasn't done. Every time Joshua came near the house, the voice reappeared, louder than ever, screaming, "He is not for you, Betsy. You belong to me." When they tried to be alone, doors slammed, dishes shattered. Betsy collapsed in fits of crying and trembling uncontrollably. Sometimes she would feel a hand on her back, gripping her spine with icy fingers. Other times, she swore she saw eyes in the walls. And the more she fought to keep Joshua close, the worse it got. Her hair fell out in clumps. Her skin turned pale. She stopped eating or sleeping. And Joshua tried to stand strong, but he was helpless. He couldn't fight what he couldn't see, and the entity was relentless. Some reports claimed that the spirit followed Joshua home, tormenting him even outside the Bell property. His family reported hearing voices mocking him and seeing shadowy figures moving through their yard at night. And eventually, Betsy gave in. With trembling hands, she returned Joshua's ring. And that night, for the first time in months, the house was quiet. Everything went still. The faceless laughter stopped. The voices went silent. No more bruises, no more slamming doors, and no more screams in the night. The Bell Witch, the tormentor, the mimic, the murderer, she was gone, as if she had simply gotten what she came for. For the first time in nearly 4 years, the Bell family could breathe. They tried not to speak of what happened, and just when they began to believe the nightmare was truly over, the witch spoke again. It was a warning this time. The Bell Witch told the family that she would be back. Not tomorrow, not next week, but exactly 107 years from that moment. Then she was silent. And that promise, 107 years, would mark the year 1935. And in 1935, Dr. Charles Bailey Bell, the descendant of John, published a book, and in it he claims that the witch did return, that she had spoken to him personally. He wouldn't say exactly what she said, only that she still remembered everything. The Bell Witch had vanished, but her shadow had been etched into the land itself. The Bell family never truly recovered. Lucy Bell, Betsy's mother, died quietly a few years after John. Betsy did eventually marry someone else. She had children, but she never spoke of the witch again, not publicly and not even to her own family. And then there's the cave. On the old Bell property lies a cave, dark, winding, and damp with centuries of silence. It wasn't part of the original haunting, but since the 1800s, people have said that it's where the witch retreated. They think it's where she waits and where her voice can still be heard. Locals call it the Bell Witch Cave. Today, the cave is privately owned, and guided tours are available, but most end before sundown, because strange things still happen in that cave. Tourists report hearing footsteps behind them, only to turn around and find no one there. Photographs come back distorted, faces blurred, shadows where there shouldn't be. Some say that their flashlights flicker the deeper they go, even with fresh batteries. One woman claimed that she felt her hair being pulled while standing in the cave. Another said she heard a girl's voice whisper her name, even though she was alone. Perhaps the most unsettling account. A man removed a small rock from that cave as a souvenir. 2 days after that, his car engine exploded. A week after that, his house caught fire. He returned the rock in person and swore to never speak of it again. Today, the Bell Witch is a centerpiece of America's first documented haunting, a case so bizarre, so publicly witnessed, that it was recorded in court records, family Bibles, and sworn statements, long before the era of clickbait or social media hysteria. This wasn't a single frightened family. This was an entire community, gripped by something they couldn't explain. Theories have tried to frame the phenomenon. Like, some say it was a poltergeist born from Betsy's repressed trauma. Others insist it was a hoax, just this crazy, elaborate, cruel prank that spun out of control. But to this day, the legend persists. Locals still avoid the cave after dark. Children are told not to speak her name in whispers. And many Bell descendants refuse to talk about the haunting at all. There's even a memorial plaque at the old Bell family cemetery. It says, John Bell, victim of the Bell Witch. May he rest in peace. That's it for today's episode. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed the story, please like, follow, and share it with a friend. Until next time, keep watch. You never know what may be lurking.